Hi, this is Leonard Kish with Health IT TV. We're here at HIMSS 16 in the HX 360 Innovation Pavilion. I'm here with Jan Oldenburg, a patient consumer advocate. At the end of day 2 it is now, and everybody's starting to get a little loopy tired. You've been coming here now for 11 years. What's changed? What have you learned? Is anything different this year?
You know, every year that I come, I think there's more emphasis on innovation, more emphasis on patients and consumers. HIMSS is getting hip, you know, in HIMSS terms.
Well, this place feels definitely pretty hip compared to, you know, the big showroom floor where there's just, you know, massive displays of the Epics and the Cerners and the Gs, and it's just...
Truly, when I first started coming, you couldn't find a mention of patient-facing stuff. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us worked really hard for a lot of years to get that to the forefront of the way that HIMSS thinks about what their mission is and how they think about what technology in the healthcare space needs to look like. So this is progress in a big way.
And what do you think's driven that? Is it payments? Is it incentives? Meaningful use?
All of the above. Also, frankly, the reality of how both healthcare and consumerism has changed. So,
in terms of apps and things like that, or
you know, I think there's a you know, look around us, think about how technology in the rest of our lives has changed. Mm-hmm. So, 12 years ago, people weren't doing nearly as much for themselves in banking, in shopping, in travel, you know, any of those kinds of spaces weren't nearly as self-service oriented, weren't nearly as mobile, weren't nearly as self-directed. So in that sense, the things that consumers are used to doing for themselves have caught up to healthcare. Not in the sense that healthcare is leading by any means, but that pressure, that drumbeat,
the expectations
are really becoming forefront for healthcare.
So what about, you mentioned a little while ago, you know, what's going to make a real shift towards connected health? You know, with the old story that, you know, there's data everywhere in healthcare, but there's no real way to pull it back together and make a really complete picture of an individual for them or for their benefit. Any ideas on how, if we'll get there?
I think we have to get there. If we don't get there, I think we're going to explode, or implode maybe is more the case. I think consumer demand is going to drive part of that. I think some of the potential for the genomic revolution, the capabilities of what you could do with personalized healthcare, but that aren't possible unless you pull together all those disparate sources of data.
With the White House Precision Medicine Initiative, you know, of course, the president said he believed that patients should be the owners of their data. He said, I'd like to believe, I think is the words that he used, that I am the owner of the data, which is, you know, a really political way to say it.
Yes, exactly.
Which is fantastic, but it did seem to be that there's a realization that you really can't have precision medicine unless you have a patient-centric system where you can actually pull all these things together, because social determinants, your environment, all these other things, as the well-worn Robert Johnson statistic says, you know, 80% of outcomes are driven by non-clinical factors, right? Mm-hmm. So there does seem to be a realization at really high levels that that's changing. course, we might only have 9 months to
I know, to make this all happen.
to make it all happen,
Right.
even progress we've all made. Do you see a way that we're going to be able to continue this momentum?
So I think there are a couple of things. It would be great to actually show some real progress in that 9 months. And some of the folks who are actively doing things around their own health, we've heard some great stories here. For example, yesterday, what day is it today? Tuesday? Yeah. Yesterday, in the Connected Health Symposium, Dana Lewis told her story of what she and her husband, Scott, have done to build an artificial pancreas for herself.
Right.
That allows them to actually be free of the daily, moment-by-moment decision-making around her diabetes. And I feel personally connected to that story because it's one of the stories that I was privileged to write about in participatory healthcare and the next book that I'm coming out with. And one of the things about that is it challenges our thinking about what medical devices are about. It challenges our thinking about what patients can do for themselves. It challenges our thinking about what's even possible in this space around how diabetes works, for example. When she tells the story about what they've uncovered about things like the decay rates of insulin in the body in order to do this work, it's amazing work that they've done, and how they've collaborated with other patients and engineers in the process. Pretty amazing stuff. And some of those kinds of stories, I think, challenge the engineers in the medical device companies and in the drug manufacturers to actually be far more transparent and far more thoughtful about what they're actually doing. So that's one thing. But, there are also other infrastructure components we've got to think about, like all of this could be torpedoed by thinking about a permissions infrastructure wrong. So right now we have this kind of minuscule, picky, moment-by-moment, hospital by hospital, doctor by doctor structure of permissions that is controlled by the entity rather than the individual.
Right.
And I think when we think about permissions, we're going to have a much more robust structure to govern it. That, again, roots in the person rather than in the entity.
Right. So that's what, from a policy perspective, that's the kind of thing we should be looking for.
I think so. And there's a number of other things that it feels to me as if we should be convening some sort of discussion, pulling together some thought leaders across this space to say, what are the accelerators we need to put in place to make sure we've got some of those infrastructure components ready so that we can take advantage of them to really leapfrog these activities. And they're not all technical. Some of them are things like policy infrastructure. Some of them are practical components, like just having some of these discussions about what would it take to, how would we do this, how could we make sure there aren't barriers.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. How can we do all that? Maybe next year at HIMSS we'll see where things are at. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we need better policy. It sounds like people at high levels understand it, and we just got to keep that momentum going and make it instantiated.
And we've got to paint a unified vision that gets people excited about the potential, I think, too.
Right.
So from your lips to God's ears by next HIMSS.
Right. Well, precision medicine and all the activity around that, there's the moonshot. There's a lot of things that are kind of are figuring out that it has to be patient consumer face.
Exactly.
So ultimately, it could be good for industry.
Yes, I think it will be. If industry can kind of grasp the potential, and get aligned behind it.
Right. All right.
Great.
Well, thanks. It's been great talking with you, Jan. It's Leonard Kish at HIMSS 16 on I am losing my mind. healthit.tv. It's been a long day, folks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.